Hello and welcome to the school board presentation. I'm Rebecca Reynolds and I originally made this presentation for my master's class of Curriculum and Instruction Management. So today I'm going to be talking about how we can make literacy growth in the Minnetonka Public Schools. In the last MCA results, it was noted that literacy was the area in which we needed to grow more. To begin, I will cover what are some curriculum best practices. Number 1, understanding by design, or backwards planning. Wiggins and McTighe in 2005 developed an awesome structure of planning for student success in curriculum called understanding by design. Instead of planning activities first, one should begin with the end in mind. Ask, what should the students know or be able to do by the end of the unit? Once you have determined the essential questions, you need to determine what is acceptable evidence and that the students produce to show that they learn the content. The last part of planning backwards is to decide on different experiences, activities, and lessons in which the students will participate to learn the content. All of these experiences and activities should be directly related to the essential questions that were determined in stage 1 of planning, which is what should the students know and be able to do by the end of the unit. The second best practice in curriculum is differentiating instruction. When you are planning activities and experiences for students, it is essential that educators consider who are their learners. Having clear outcomes for students, which is the acceptable evidence, allows educators to be able to differentiate a unit based on students' interests and needs. Carol Tomlinson has provided incredible resources to teachers on how one can differentiate instruction in order to meet students where they are in their learning journey. Some of these examples are listed here. You want to think about learning styles, the students' learning levels, the multiple intelligences. Differentiate using small group learning, whole group learning, partner learning. Get to know your students personally. Think about the different cultures. Establish your classroom community. And also consider students' language barriers. Think about the physical learning environment. Think about using flexible furniture, open spaces, and flexible spaces. I suggest that we, as a district, work on integrating understanding by design and differentiated instruction. They're truly the perfect two. The song Perfect Two by Auburn says, "'Cause you're the one for me, and I'm the one for you, and take the both of us, and we're the perfect two." And I think this very well describes integrating UBD and differentiated instruction. They pair very well together because they support one another. UBD requires that you think about the end goal before planning activities and experiences for how the students will learn. Differentiated instruction requires that you take into account who are your learners and what do they need in order to learn well. They both take into consideration who are the students and how they will learn the content. In integrating UBD and DI, it is important to remember that in stage 1, the essential questions will remain the same no matter the level of learning for students. Stage 3, the learning experiences and activities, is where the differentiation will take place for learners. Remember that what the students should know from a unit plan will remain the same no matter where they are in their learning journey. In this quote that you see here on the screen, together, backward design and differentiated instruction describe a comprehensive way of thinking about curriculum, assessment, and instruction stemming from a shared understanding of what constitutes effective teaching and learning. Next, I assert that it's very, very important to utilize responsive teaching. In order to carry out UBD or DI, teachers need to first reflect best practices in responsive teaching. Part of differentiated instruction is building personal relationships with the students. In order to learn, students need to know that their basic needs are met. They need to know that they are noticed and important. Responsive teaching requires that teachers do just that. Tomlinson and McTeague state that, in truth, far more students would be successful in school if we understood that it to be our job to craft circumstances that lead to success, rather than letting circumstance take its course. Even the best curriculum delivered in a take-it-or-leave-it fashion will be taken by a few and left by too many. That was published in their 2006 book. As educators, we must be thoughtful on how we construct and implement curriculum so that students are able to learn the best that they can. Some examples of responsive teaching are build personal relationships with the students, build a safe and fun learning community and environment, build a culturally responsive classroom to connect students' learning to their cultures, find out and enlist students' interests as motivation, know students' learning profiles in order to meet student needs. The next part that I'm going to take you into, as I've just covered curriculum best practice that we can use in growing in literacy here in Minnetonka, I'm going to talk about some guiding design questions that were developed by Robert Marzano. So one was in his 2007 book, The Art of Science and Teaching, and I've integrated that book with his new book, published in 2017, The New Art and Science of Teaching. So here you'll see that he has 10 different guiding questions, but for the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on 1, 3, 4, and 6. So I'll leave this slide here so you can just take a moment to glance over what are the different design questions that Marzano has. Okay, so guiding design question 1. How will I communicate clear learning goals that help students understand the progression of knowledge that they are trying to master and where they are along in that progression? Part of responsive teaching requires teachers to know where a student is academically. Setting clear learning goals for students allows the teacher as well as the student to be able to identify where the student is in his or her learning journey. In Marzano's 2007 edition, he states that a learning goal is a statement of what students will know or be able to do. That's on page 17 in his book. After identifying clear learning goals, a teacher is more clearly able to identify learning activities to help meet the students' needs and their goals. This pairs very nicely with understanding by design, where when planning a unit, teachers are identifying the essential questions and goals for that unit of study. Marzano, in his 2007 edition, suggests that making a rubric to state the goals. This gives the students a clear visual for themselves and also for the teacher to know where a student is in his or her learning progress towards mastery. And as a teacher, I can tell you that I have used Marzano's 4-3-2-1 rubric with students before because it gives them a chance to be a reflective learner as well, to know what are the expectations that I am supposed to be meeting and where am I right now in this progression. So this is a really helpful tool that I highly suggest we implement well in literacy. Guiding design question 3. When content is new, how will I design and deliver lessons that help students understand which parts are important and how the parts fit together? According to Marzano in his 2007 edition, he says on page 31 that the basic generalization has been that learners must be actively engaged in the process of information, and that the teaching and learning process involves an interaction among the teacher, the students, and the content. New content should be presented in a variety of ways due to the different types of learners which compose the classroom. An important aspect of presenting new content is engaging the students in some preview of the content to gauge how much background information the students have in the content. Marzano also, that came from Marzano, that was one of his assertions as well, and he also asserts that it's important to present some strategies that are effective in helping students gain and retain knowledge and understanding it comprehensively. Some of those strategies are to make things into small chunks, use active processing, summarizing, note-taking, non-linguistic representation, so building physical models of knowledge, drawing visuals, movement-based learning, reflection, and cooperative learning. Which, when you think about his assertions as well, this takes you right back to differentiated instruction, thinking of all the different ways that are going to help students understand because of how each student is made differently. Next, we're going to look at guiding design question number 4, which focuses on deepening the content. After content has been presented, how will I design and deliver lessons that help students deepen their understanding and develop fluency in skills and processes? No matter how well an educator initially presents content the first time around, it will not suffice for long-term retention. That comes right from Marzano in his 2007 edition. As a school district, Minnetonka is continually seeking to deepen the students' knowledge about content. Minnetonka's instructional framework is a guide to show teachers how they might take a lesson to the next deeper level. This framework is shown here as well as on the next slide, so you can see a little bit more clearly. Marzano, in his 2007 edition, Marzano suggests that in order to help students deepen their understanding, students must have tasks, I quote, tasks that require them to examine similarities and differences. That's on page 71. Students can do this through comparing, classifying, creating metaphors, and creating analogies. Error analysis is also crucial to helping students deepen their understanding, which is also asserted by Marzano. But I've used that a lot actually as a teacher, and it is amazing to see how the students are able to make more connections after they make mistakes, and they push forward and they find another way to solve that. And that also ties in with the growth mindset that we really work on a lot in Minnetonka as well in our classrooms. By having students think through their errors and correct them, they are constructing knowledge on the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. In order for students to develop fluency in skills, it is essential that educators allocate time for them to be able to practice this knowledge. In his 2007 edition, Marzano suggests to create a progress chart to help students monitor their own fluency progress. Educators help deepen students' understanding as well through allowing time for cooperative learning. The dialogue that takes place allows for a student to explain his or her thinking. Lastly, Marzano emphasizes the importance of making homework purposeful for the student's learning. Homework should enhance fluency and procedural knowledge, as well as deepen their knowledge on a subject matter. Here is the Minnetonka Teaching and Learning Instructional Framework. You can see that we focus on authentic and real-world learning, collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, global learning, personalized learning, and use of technology for learning. these are 21st century skills, so we are looking at how can we get all the way over to the right of the framework, which is very, very deep learning. Guiding design question number 6, which is the last question that I plan to focus on in order to make literacy growth in the district. Throughout all types of lessons, what strategies will I use to help students continually integrate new knowledge with old knowledge and revise their understanding accordingly? Many of the strategies that were presented on the previous 2 slides ago are also useful in helping students integrate new knowledge and old knowledge while revising their understanding accordingly. Take, for instance, the visual of the light bulbs. The incandescent light bulb produces great light. It's worked well. We've used it for hundreds of years. It's great. But with the new research and knowledge, we have found that the LED light bulb is safer and still produces amazing light. This is an example of taking new knowledge, integrating with the old, and revising the understanding accordingly. In Marzano's 2017 edition, he suggests that allowing the students the opportunity to elaborate on information is a great strategy for allowing students to integrate knowledge and revise their understanding. Previewing strategies, reviewing content, as well as assigning purposeful homework are all beneficial in helping students to interact and integrate old and new knowledge. That's from his 2017 edition as well. Now that we have covered curriculum best practice, as well as some guiding design questions, we're going to talk about, what can we do for the teachers? How can we professionally develop them to help them be successful in planning for and guiding students in their learning in the literacy realm? Formative assessment. As a school district, we really want to focus on those guiding questions to help our students grow. Well, what is our action plan, you ask? Well, in these next few slides, I will lay out 2 suggestions for professional development for teachers. In Doug Reeves' 2010 book, he states that effective formative assessment is designed to promote learning, not merely render an evaluation. It is a reciprocal process influencing both the teacher and the learner. It's found on page 90. Too often, teachers are unsure of what makes formative assessment truly formative. In order to further literacy development in Minnetonka, I suggest that teachers engage in professional development around how to use formative assessment effectively. If the reading science suggests that dyslexia can be detected early on in literacy development, professional development on how to use formative assessment in the early stages of reading and writing would be beneficial. Secondly, not only for the teachers is formative assessment important, I also suggest that administrators should use a formative assessment as a manner to assess the staff. A summative evaluation does not give the true picture into the teacher's realm of abilities. Reeves, in his 2010 book, suggests that administrators focus on 6 domains. 1. Planning and preparation for learning. 2. Classroom management. 3. Delivery of instruction. 4. Monitoring assessment. And 5. Follow-up. Each domain will be scored on a rubric for monitoring, 5 assessment, and 6 would be the follow-up. Each domain will be scored on a rubric expert, proficient, needs improvement, and does not meet standards. If an administrator is formatively assessing staff, they will be able to have a clear understanding of the roadmap of success. If administrators give teachers more direct and specific feedback, they will be able to be a solid model on how to formatively assess students in the classroom. So, administrators will model using formative assessments in order for teachers to see how they can then use formative assessment in the classroom with the students. This plan for clear and explicit feedback for not only teachers but also students will allow teachers and leaders to see where are the gaps in our literacy program and be able to take the next action step towards closing them. In the article, Meet the Promise of Content Standards, Professional Learning Required, published in 2012, Joe Ellen Killian argues that it is up to both the school leaders and the teacher leaders to improve and implement meaningful professional learning opportunities. She argues that the school administrators are the models for it. Next, I suggest that we focus on using a model of teacher-led professional development. As we focus on becoming formative assessment experts, we will be able to identify specific gaps in our literacy program in teaching of the content. Through knowing this information, the next action plan will address these needs more specifically. Minnetonka already has a highly engaged and active teachers, so my plan simply capitalizes on this. My plan for enhancing our literacy program is to have teacher-led professional development around literacy strategies. In 2010, Reeves recounts a story of a school where teachers attended professional development, but it was clear that those teachers were disengaged and did not even want to attend. The principal of this story of Monroe formed a learning task force, and together they decided on 15 initiatives on which to focus. So that learning task force was made up of teachers. The goal was to have a focused staff on student learning. I assert that empowering teachers to be the leaders for professional development will enhance student learning. In the journal, Educational Leadership, in the article, Principal Connection, Who Decides What, published in 2010, Thomas Hoare states, teachers are professionals who know their curriculum and understand their students, and they need the autonomy to pursue the course that makes sense to them, on page 2. As district leaders, we believe in our staff, and that we have the highest quality of teachers. We trust them that they will identify areas of growth in our literacy program, and then they will form teams around different strategies to implement. Killian, in her 2012 article, also says that educators must also take an active role in monitoring professional learning, advocating standards for quality, and demanding results in student achievement, not merely in satisfaction with the learning experience. Well, I also think that this quote by Doug Reeves really ties together what I'm talking about here. High impact learning is not about creating a life of efficiency and ease for teachers and leaders. It is about undertaking the challenge of professional work with deep meaning and lifelong impact. Action steps. Here in Minnetonka, we don't just talk the talk, but we really do our best to walk the walk. In the next few minutes, I'll present to you what are the action steps which we plan to follow in order to propel our literacy program forward and grow. Action step number 1, create open dialogue. If we are going to successfully grow in literacy and use Marzano's design questions to help guide us in teaching the standards, it is imperative that we have open dialogue across all grade levels and departments. Before any major change takes place, transparency is imperative and open dialogue is important. In 2012, Hirsch and Killian wrote Common Core Contradictions and Challenges. They assert that teachers need opportunities for cross-level dialogue and uncovering their own assumptions, especially those that enhance their sense of efficacy and responsibility as part of an instructional team. In addition, both teachers and principals need opportunities for open dialogue about the temporary ambiguity that surrounds all implementation phases. The first action step is to promote a culture of open conversation where judgment is deferred and all members feel safe to share their thoughts, ideas, and opinions. While the authentic engagement in dialogue, ongoing conversation, and substantive collaborative work may be challenging at first, the greater the challenge, the deeper the understanding, the more likely teachers will acquire another essential disposition. Collaboration with peers is a part of professional responsibility. Action step number 2. Involve principals. After having open dialogue, the second action step is to ensure that principals are involved in the hard work. In 2005, the National Association of Secondary School Principals published Creating a Culture of Literacy, a guide for middle and high school principals. This executive summary focused on how important it is that principals become the literacy leaders in their districts. Principals must be involved in knowing what is happening in the literary world in their schools. The NASP also asserts that principals are the instructional leaders in their schools. Some action steps which NASP recommends to help principals be more closely involved include building a literacy leadership team, analyzing student data to determine the gaps, establishing a realistic literacy school budget, implementing strong professional development around literacy, and hiring highly effective teachers. This NASP article is a very informative article around literacy growth, so I do recommend it to you in order to read more in detail what they suggest. Leaders matter. Leaders have a fundamental responsibility to provide intellectual stimulation and rigorous learning experiences for their staff. In the NASP article, I quote, "To be an effective literacy leader in the building, the principal must be viewed by the teachers as a role model of a reflective, lifelong learner and have their respect as knowledgeable in the area of adolescent literacy." Lastly, if we are expecting that teachers be involved in taking students deeper in literacy, if we are expecting that teachers utilize many different strategies to engage students in knowledge integration, if we are expecting teachers to formatively assess and to lead professional development, all in order to help students meet and surpass learning goals of the literacy standards, it is essential that we provide the appropriate resources for them to make this happen. As a teacher, I can attest to the frustrations that one feels when the expectations are high, but the appropriate resources lack in order to even meet the expectations. In Meet the Promise of Content Standards, Professional Learning Required, published in 2012, Joellen Killian asserts that one of the best action plans which a school can take is to ensure that the appropriate and adequate resources are there to be used. On page 21, she sums it up well, saying, "Professional learning that increases educator effectiveness and results for all students requires prioritizing, monitoring, and coordinating resources for educator learning." As a school district, we want 100% of students to be successful in literacy learning. As administrators and teacher leaders, we are obligated then to ensure that adequate resources are available for professional learning in literacy as well as for implementing the professional development in the classroom. In Minnetonka Public Schools, our focus is to do what is best for students. So I ask you, what are we going to do about our literacy program? Lastly, to close, I would like to read this quote that you see here on the screen. "Both states and school systems can take immediate action to improve resources for professional learning by analyzing what resources are available, assessing how the available resources are used, and realigning those resources to support high-priority areas." Our students are why we're here. Minnetonka is a very student-centered school district, and we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing and how can we further develop their growth and literacy. Thank you.